Welcome to the space where we break down barriers and perceptions about a career in law by talking to the talented people of Gowling WLG. I'm Emma Dennis, Diversity, Inclusion and Wellbeing Senior Manager at Gowling WLG, so join me as we get to dive under the surface and understand the diverse experiences and perspectives of our people, how they've got to where they are and what they wish they'd known.
Hi Sam.
Hello.
Thanks for being here today. It's so good to have you. How are you doing first?
I am good. Thank you very much for having me.
So I think, if my research is correct, that you've been at the firm since 2015?
Yes.
Did you always know that you wanted to be a lawyer?
No, absolutely not. I actually thought as a kid I would do something with horses or animals. And actually my family were persuading me to be a vet. But then I did do a legal foundation course and enjoyed it. And actually that led to me wanting to go on and qualify as a lawyer. So actually what I started doing in Bournemouth, where I first worked, was the legal executive course. So I qualified as a legal executive first. Yeah. Then decided I wanted to go on and become a solicitor. So I did the GDL and the LPC and moved to London, basically. So did all of that, working full-time, so studying part-time, and did the whole lot through, started at a firm in Bournemouth, moved to London, carried on at a firm called Stewart's, which is litigation practice, and I decided when I was there I wanted to get more into corporate, so I moved to Osborne Clarke. So I finished my I suppose qualification when I was at Osborne Clarke, and then moved to Gowling in 2015.
So what was it that attracted you to law? What specifically made you sort of go from that thing of thinking you were going to do something with animals to then something completely different?
I think, so I really enjoyed the foundation course I did, and actually that was, I think it was a legal exec based course, and it was very much like, I think it was housing, like employment law and stuff like that, and I think it was just really helpful. And I thought this is actually quite helpful on a day-to-day basis anyway, but I think it was the kind of curiosity and the ongoing learning in a weird way. You're always having to stay updated, you're always having to learn something, and actually when new things come out, or there's new sectors or there's new pieces of legislation, you have to learn that and be on top of it, and I quite enjoy that. So actually one of the reasons I moved from litigation to corporate was actually because I didn't really felt like I related to the litigation, and I could relate more to the brands and the corporates that you see on the high street, or you read about in the papers and you can understand a bit more about them because you know who they are and what they do. So it's kind of more tangible, you understand what you're doing. And I just thought, partly the ongoing learning, partly actually this is quite interesting. I really enjoy the deal making, and I think as I've done the work, it's the deal making and the transactions that's kept me doing it, really.
And your route into law, you mentioned earlier, your qualification route, I guess when you did it wasn't the standard?
Yeah, absolutely right. So I didn't go to university, so I finished school at my A-levels. I did think about going to university and I wanted to do management science. I was looking at Loughborough, but decided that I didn't particularly enjoy my A-levels at the school I was at the time, and decided I didn't want to go to university. So actually thought, what can I do that doesn't involve me going to university? And I found the legal executive qualification, as I said, part-time. And you could do that whilst working, and I needed to get qualifying employment, so I was working in law firms, originally actually in general office, and then moved into a trainee legal exec position. So started the legal exec course part-time, qualified through that, and you become a fellow of the institute when you've done 2 years qualifying employment, which I had because I'd been working in law firms at the time, and then decided that I wanted to qualify as a solicitor and moved. But when I started doing the legal exec stuff, it was in Bournemouth, and actually the firm that I worked at the time, Coles Miller, were great because they understood the process. They had a qualified legal executive, a fellow actually, who was a partner equivalent in the pensions team or wills team, and they kind of got it. But what I realised when I was interviewing to move to London is actually at the time, and this was back in like 2006, no one really knew what the legal exec qualification was. They obviously understood the law degree and the traditional university process, but they didn't understand ILEX, or that actually it is a legal qualification that means you can practice. Because half the qualification is case law and the other half is practice, same as doing your law degree and then your LPC.
Yeah.
So getting into law firms up here was a bit more tricky, partly because they didn't understand the legal exec route or the qualification route, but then when you say you're doing the GDL, which is graduate diploma in law conversion, they understood that and they understood the training process, so I kind of was on a more level playing field then. But lots of conversations with HR and firms trying to explain what the legal exec course was, what it means in terms of qualification, explaining that GDL was a top-up to actually the equivalent to a law degree, and then explaining that the LPC for me would be normal like it was for everyone else. So it was novel at the time, Gowling obviously support that now. We have apprentices doing the legal exec course, which I think is amazing because you get that legal experience when you're working as well as studying. So actually we're supporting people who want to come through and don't want to do the traditional route like me, but actually have the support of a firm like this and the varied sectors and the varied practice areas, and can actually get a lot more experience in a commercial law firm. So I think it's brilliant. I found it really hard. I'm not going to say it was an easy way to qualify, and if, to be honest, hand on heart, I would not have picked it because I think it was super hard for me. And actually creds to Osborne Clark because they took me on as a paralegal in corporate. Adrian Bob, shout out to Adrian, took a chance on me, put me in corporate, and I loved it. So I stayed and qualified there, and no looking back, but it is really hard work. So to all of the people that we have here, massive kudos to them because they are working really hard, studying as well as the day job.
Yeah, a lot to take on.
Yeah,
a lot to
no time for hobbies.
And then you were promoted to partner back in 2021.
Yes.
Did you always want partnership? Was that always the aim?
Yes, I had decided, I think, when I wanted to move from being a legal exec to a solicitor, that was the target. So that was always the plan.
Did you have any preconceptions about partnership before you were promoted, or anything you thought it was going to be like that? Now you've got a different view of it. Now you've made it to partner.
I think it's difficult on sort of preconceptions. I thought it would be hard work. There's lots of things as a non-partner but senior person in a team that you want to know more about and you want to understand more about, or you don't think you can see progressing. And I think the really nice thing about being on the other side of the fence, as it were, is actually you can see that it's progressing, and it has been for a while. It's just that you weren't privy to that information beforehand for obvious reasons. And actually, there's a load of stuff going on behind the scenes that, unless you're in the partnership, you wouldn't necessarily know about, and it's announced at the right time to the rest of the firm. I suppose what I hadn't quite realised, and you realise rapidly in your first year, or at least I did, and I think it's probably fair to say most of my cohort did as well, is how much extra there is to do. So it's not just the fee earning and the business development, so winning the clients and doing the work. It's a bit of HR, it's sort of the team support stuff, it's representing the firm, it's a lot of other stuff as well. So there is quite a lot of learning, I think, in year one. I think year two has been slightly easier in terms of you kind of know a bit more about how it's all working. But yeah, so I'm definitely pleased I went for it. If anyone is thinking about going for it, I would say go for it still, but just have your eyes open to how hard it can be.
Yeah. And how do you manage to balance sort of a demanding job and then work-life balance and outside of work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really think I have any hobbies. So, I mean, like keeping fit, running and stuff, but I don't know really. It's a tricky one. I'm in a transactional team. So we go through fits and starts of being busy and quiet, and actually I tend to make the most of when it's quiet and just get used to it when it's busy. So I'm used to that, and I have been probably ever since I was at Osborne Clark, and I've been in corporate the whole time. You kind of get to learn the cycles, so make the most of the time that you're not busy and go out and do stuff then and get away. But I think it's, especially with COVID, I think we've all learned we need to find things that you can relax or chill out or be mindful with. So whether that's yoga or meditating or whatever, or having facials or going for a run or going horse riding, whatever it is you want to do, work out what those things are. So I've worked out what works for me in terms of chilling out and getting out and calming down outside the office. Just make sure you have time for those and acknowledge, I think there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just, you've got to just get to that light and then you'll have the relaxation time.
We'll take a short break now, and when we're back we'll find out more about Sam's experience of sponsorship and the advice that she'd give to those who are earlier in their careers. Welcome back to part two. We're going to kick off, Sam, with some quick fire questions to get to know you a little bit more.
Okay.
And they're just some silly questions. So we'll start off with some general ones that should be relatively easy. And we'll go through them quickly. What was your first job?
I worked in a shop, food shop. I actually worked at the shop at the stables.
Nice. Where did you grow up?
Bit of Surrey, bit of Dorset.
What time do you usually wake up in the morning?
5:30, but not because I want to.
Wow. If you had a choice, what time would you wake up in the morning?
Preferably, yeah.
Is your bed made right now?
Yeah.
Well done,
Sorry.
mine isn't. What's your favourite breakfast?
Well, honestly, pancakes, bacon and maple syrup.
Nice choice.
Healthy.
Nice choice. What's your dream holiday destination?
Okay, that's not a fair question. Ibiza. Because I go every year, yeah.
Oh, I've never been. Never been to
amazing.
Ibiza.
You should go.
Okay,
Let me know
I
if
need
you've
to
got
book
some
a
tips.
holiday and I'll come to you for tips. What's your hidden talent?
Oh my god, it's definitely not cooking. I don't really have a hidden talent. Horse riding.
What's your go-to karaoke song?
Living on a prayer. Which I will absolutely murder, so definitely not going to be doing that live.
I like that one. Right, now these are some either or questions. Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Would you rather fly or have super strength?
Well, I can fly myself.
Fly.
I can fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, fly.
For anybody that couldn't see me then, I did fucking win.
Definitely fly. I'd be on holiday every 5 minutes. It'd be great.
Are you more of an introvert or an extrovert?
Extrovert.
Night in or night out?
Out.
Would you rather travel to the past or the future?
Past.
Learn by watching or learn by doing?
Doing.
And then one more. What do you think people misunderstand about you?
That I'm an armadillo.
That you're an armadillo?
Yeah, soft on the inside, crunch on the outside.
I like that. That's brilliant. So I feel like I know you a lot better now. Right, I said that we'd talk a little bit more about sponsorship.
Yes.
And you were part of the first cohort of the firm's breakthrough programme. So that's our sponsorship programme aimed at people that are aspiring for partnership that come from what in the firm are typically underrepresented groups.
Yeah.
Just really curious about what your experience of that programme was like.
Yeah, I think I was lucky because I had a really good sponsor. So I had a banking partner. You can't have a sponsor that's in your team, so obviously I couldn't have someone in corporate, which made complete sense. But it was you understood transactions enough, obviously, to be able to give me the sponsorship that I needed for my kind of progression. I think it's probably two things I found really valuable. I don't know which one is slightly more valuable than the other. I think it was probably just explaining what partnership is going to be like, down to the detail of, well, how does the pay work and what is it like going from being employed to self-employed and the kind of practical changes. Yeah. Because you can do as much reading as you want on that, but actually understanding the first bit of paper they send through to you is just it's mind melt. But the second thing was exposure and who you need to be kind of in front of and why and how you do that. So I mean, I'm quite lucky in that my team have always been super supportive. Corporate group have always been really supportive of my career progression, and to the extent that I would have people that I didn't necessarily know that well coming up to me and saying, you need to write this article because it will support your application or whatever, which is amazing. But it was very much like, well, have you had exposure to this particular team or this particular person, because that would be useful for you, and they might work in the same sector as you, or they have done this work for this client historically, so actually there might be connections there that might be useful, and actually being able to make those introductions. I had regular check-ins, we had good catch-ups. I mean, he would take homework away that were things that he needed to go and find out about what I should do next and things like that, and then we'd catch up and then we would do it. Yeah. I would have jobs to do in terms of it's a lot of it was around exposure, so it was things like, if you're not speaking at enough conferences, or can you go and talk to so and so about hosting a conference where you speak, and getting yourself known externally as well as internally, but internally to the right people, that kind of thing. So I found it really, really valuable. I mean, what I have done since is offer to sponsor other people who are coming through. Brilliant. And explain what my experience was and then what they should be seeking. Yeah. Not necessarily from me, but if they had a sponsor, then this is what you should be kind of looking for. Yeah. And it's more, I think, as well around the don't be afraid to ask. So if you're not getting, then ask for it. Yeah. Whatever it is you think you're not getting, or whatever you want to know. And it's supposed to be a situation where you can chat openly and freely about someone who's had the experience, and can tell you, and if they can't tell you, then they can go and find out, hopefully.
And then I mentioned earlier on that you head up our UK Cannabis group, and I'd just love to hear more about that work and what you're doing in that area.
Yeah. Thank you. So yes, so we've been doing cannabis work actually for a while. We've obviously got the regulatory teams who've been doing advice on cannabis products for years, but actually formed the sector really early 2019, end of 2018, when there was a legislation change to allow medicinal cannabis. And it was opportunity, I think, and interest. I was super interested in it, and then opportunity came through the door, knocking in the form of an investment bank, essentially saying, can we help them with a transaction? And I was desperate to say yes, but obviously given it's cannabis and reputational and things like that, we needed to think about the firm's reputation and what work we could actually do. So we sought legal opinions for the firm to make sure we could do the work we wanted to do. And actually from then, so really from 2019 onwards, we've been really busy. Various different work. So it started off being quite a lot of corporate transactional work. There were a load of companies coming over from overseas and in the UK that wanted to list in London and raise money or do acquisitions over here, and then that has grown in the UK for us into obviously a lot of related regulatory work, so public law team looking at licensing arrangements and product description or content. Our FS regulatory team does all the anti-money laundering and proceeds of crime act advice, and I think every deal they have to be involved with from a regulatory perspective for obvious reasons when you're dealing with novel medicines and drugs. But it's grown more than that, so we're doing commercial contracts, we've done employment advice, we've done data sharing agreements, we're doing clinic registrations, seed supply contracts, banking, so taking security over assets, so cannabis active assets, real estate where you're looking for land to cultivate medicinal cannabis. And more recently, so markets are quiet at the moment. We tend to follow what North America does, so it's quiet in the UK at the moment, and our legislation is obviously very, very different, where recreational cannabis here is prohibited. But we've seen a lot of interest from overseas companies wanting to come to the UK to create CBD wellness products, so food and beverage supplements, or actually looking at the regulatory regime in the UK to work out whether they can grow cannabis here for medicinal reasons, and how can we help them with that. So it really is full service. And looking at other novel medicines as well. So it's the kind of led into psychedelics. So things like psilocybin, which you might have heard of, magic mushrooms. So that's being used for depression, PTSD. Yeah. So we're looking at quite interesting cases at the moment, matters around that regulatory and acquisition work there as well. Some of it's overseas. And it's been, I think probably worth saying that we have a huge team in Canada that do this work, and they've been doing it for years, because Canada's much more advanced in their regulations than we are, and recreational cannabis is not prohibited, it's legal. So they have over 100 lawyers in Canada working on this, and we do have sort of a good referral network between the businesses in relation to that, but our sector's almost standalone in that we do work outside of that as well. So it's been really good to see. I find it really, really interesting. I just think it's quite cool that a plant can do this stuff. And, you know, look at some of the big pharma companies. Jazz Pharmaceuticals, which was GW Pharma, was first listed cannabis company some years ago. Wow. So it's interesting. And I think what I also really enjoy is seeing some of the really big household names looking at this stuff. Yeah. And, you know, this can treat pain, and they're trialling it for cancer and things like that. So it's good. It will be good if we could get it to work better in the UK.
I guess going back to what you said one of the things you said at the beginning about when I asked you about why you got into law, what you said about that sort of learning things and the newness of things. I guess that this lends itself to that as well, in that it's sort of something that's, like you say, relatively new to what we do, and being able to sort of grow that.
Definitely. I mean, big learning for me, because it turned from an interest into, we can actually execute this from a practice basis, and so obviously the regulatory teams were all over it anyway. It's just another novel medicine to them, or another medicine, so looking at the relevant Misuse of Drugs Act and licensing and MHRA stuff is all day to day for them anyway, but I did have to read into it, so I've done a lot of reading, I've been to a lot of conferences, but I think it's good because you can see, for me it's been kind of starting in the sector and watching it grow in the UK, excuse the pun, but also I'm learning how it's going, and is the UK legislation going to change, and if it's going to change, what should it do, how likely is that going to happen? What's government thinking about it? What are the lobbyists saying about it? What are the patient access groups saying about it? And kind of understanding from all of them where we are now, why that isn't working necessarily, or how could it work better? What's absolutely not going to work? And trying to work a way through that, so then when we see clients who are looking to come into the sector, you can then explain, well, this is kind of where we are now and where we need to get to, and compare notes. And I think it's beneficial for us having the overseas offices as well, because you can compare notes overseas as well. So I found it really interesting.
No, it's fascinating, and I've wanted to ask you that question for ages. It's about what sort of stuff that you do. I guess if we look back over your career to date as well, are there any sort of big deals or big pieces of work you've worked on that really stand out for you as just really great experiences?
Yeah, there's been some cool ones. There's been some infamous ones, which, so one of my first, we'll start with the infamous ones. One of the first big floats I did at Osborne Clark was Patisserie Valerie, which was the cake shop. And I said earlier that I wanted partly to do corporate because you can kind of understand the brands a bit better, and that is a really good example to me of understanding what the brand does, because you've been in their shops and all the rest of it. It ended up being, it floated, but then there was a bit of a disaster story afterwards, which we won't talk about. But that's a good example of kind of understanding the brands that you work for, and I really like that. I really like to understand what I'm doing and who I'm working for, and we kind of understand who your clients are because you've participated in whatever it is they do. I worked with Chris Rogers and Stuart on the sale of Williams' F1 team, which was super cool just because it's Formula 1, so that's good. Really, really interesting. And I like Formula 1, so it's nice to kind of see the inner workings to a certain extent and kind of understand what's happening, and that was a big deal. Big deal, emotive, not least because it was the family selling the family business to an investor. So it was cool, but also quite emotional for everyone, I think, at the end. And then biggest deals, I think more recently, was the Co-Masters takeover, which I worked with Sinnel on. It was a takeover by Take-Two, which turned into a takeover by EA Games. So again, names that you've heard of, and really interesting. We worked with the company from their initial float, did their acquisitions for them. Really, really lovely team, lovely client, and such a good deal as well. It's obviously really sad to see them go, always it is on a takeover, you're like saying bye to your best client. But really, really good deal. We smashed that in COVID as well. So not only was it a brilliant sort of double transaction, but the fact that we managed to all do it in COVID, remote everything. It was a bit of a test and sort of trialing new things as well. And we had all the meetings done virtually on a virtual platform and stuff like that. So that was good. So yeah, those are the kind of standout ones. I think on the cannabis stuff, acting for some of the companies that are first things to list on the stock exchange, first and second companies to list, things like that. And working with companies that are bringing new novel medicines to the market is really, really good. I really enjoy that, because actually kind of that resonates a bit more with how you're really helping people in your corporate job, raising money for shareholders and companies. Well, we're actually helping medicines get to market on that, so that's partly why I enjoy that. So there's some really good names in there that I can't talk about, but it's really nice to be doing that work, because you can kind of see what the end point is, and the end point is very much this is going to help all of us. So I like that.
And what's it like when you've been working on a big deal and it's all done? What's that moment like when it's all
knackering? First response, tired. It's brilliant. I love it. It's like that endorphin rush where you go for a run or whatever it is you do and you get that hit. I'm like doing deals, so it's brilliant. Love it. Most of the time love it. Sometimes there's tricky ones where you think, I'm just really glad that's over. But yeah, most of the time it's
between joy and relief.
Yeah, exactly. And it is very joyful for everyone. And big congratulations and stuff. And we've got some really lovely clients. So our repeat bank clients are always a pleasure to work with. And it's just nice to build those relationships, so you get to the point where you've known some of these people for so long that you just know what they want straight away. It's a lot easier. It's very much straightforward, but always good to close the deal.
And what advice would you give anybody that's sort of coming up now, looking at their career, maybe thinking about partnership? What things could they start to do, or should they be thinking about to help them on their way?
I think goes back to the mentoring and sponsoring, really. Firm offers kind of mentoring throughout anyway, but in addition to that, you can seek your own mentors as well. So if you're particularly interested in a certain route or a certain sector or a certain topic, then seek out that advice as well. And I think be true to yourself and what you actually want to do. So I say this to a lot to our trainees, is not encouraging them to leave, but if there isn't a role for you that you desperately want to do, then you should really consider, because this is the rest of your life. It's the rest of your career. Be true about what you actually want to spend your time doing. And I say that because I moved from a litigation firm, which I kind of fell into, to a corporate commercial firm, which I chose to do, and I'm glad it worked out, because I didn't really know how it was going to work out. I thought I'd prefer it, but go with what you are confident enough to think that you would like to do, and then get the kind of support and mentoring for it. Look into it and really use your mentoring and sponsoring network to get there, because I think the feedback coming through from that, which will all be around development and building your personal brand and supporting the sector and the specialism or whatever it is you are doing, is really important, because actually that's all the stuff you're going to have to write on your application anyway. So think about it early and get out there and meet people. And don't be afraid to walk around the office and talk to people. We're actually a really open plan physically anyway, but really open in terms of welcoming people into new groups if people want to get involved in new sectors and jobs and things like that. So get involved as much as you can.
Make the most out of the opportunity.
Definitely.
And then my last question for you today is just, what's the best thing that's happened to you this week so far?
Close the deal on Monday.
Perfect.
So far, it is only Tuesday.
It is only Tuesday. I'm sure amazing things are going to happen the rest of the week
I hope
as well. So a huge thank you, Sam, for joining us today and for sharing your story and your insights. We'll be back again next week to get to know more talented people at Gowling WLG. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful week, and remember, we all have the power to make a difference.